I'm Nikki Halliwell, and this is SEO in 2025.
Nikki, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My tip for 2025 is to make sure that you're using a migration briefing document with your client at the start of the migration briefing process. The document is designed to help you gather as much information as possible and to avoid issues later down the line. What I mean by this is ultimately you want to capture all of the information about the project as early as possible and have it documented so that you can refer back to it as needed throughout the project.
Okay, superb. So a fairly succinct definition of what a migration briefing document is. Is it necessary for every migration?
Yeah, I would say so. It's because a lot of the questions as well that I'm talking about and that I'll go into, they might seem like standard or they might seem obvious to a lot of people when it comes to a migration, but the problem is that they're not written down or they become lost in endless email chains. Whereas if you have that central location, it means that everything is there and ready from the start. And it's right for every business, in my opinion, is because, it's not specific. At some point, most websites do go through a migration, whether it's a design change, whether it's a domain change, or whatever, regardless of what industry you're in or what type of website you have, there will be a migration of some type. And because of the amount of moving parts, things can easily go wrong. And this helps to avoid that.
And right for every type of migration as well.
Yeah, it's, the idea is that you start with this as a template, but then, add to it, change to it, customize it based on the information that you as the SEO need to know as part of the project. And, if you know that your certain client has challenges that client B doesn't have, then obviously make sure that you capture that in the migration document at the start.
Okay, and I guess you're actually capturing who's responsible for doing different aspects of implementing different aspects, just to ensure that we know who's responsible for each thing.
Yeah, so I'll give you some examples of some of the questions that I tend to include in my briefing documents, and that'll give you some idea of what I'm talking about. Before I do that though, it doesn't have to look a certain way. I call it a migration briefing document. It can be a Word doc, spreadsheet, literally whatever you and your client are happy to work with, as long as it can gather the information. Some of the things that I include is what is the reason for the migration. So what is being migrated? Is it the whole site? Is it just the blog, for example? When are you planning to go live is obviously a crucial question. You want to know if that's a crucial deadline and how that lines up with peak business or sales seasons. We have a client at the minute that is currently having delays, but they cannot delay the launch because of peak season and costs and everything else. So that's a conversation that's going on. But we flagged it at the start, so we know that it's not a surprise to us, and we factored that into our resourcing. Other questions include how far along in the build process are they? Because not every client comes to an SEO right at the start. It might be, oh yeah, we want to migrate next week. I've had that quite a few times, whereas if you get that on paper, you can start to plan, you can start to raise concerns straight away, and you've got it documented as well for you to refer back to. You want to know what developer support and resources they have. Is it internal or external? And you want to know what lines of communication you can set up with them, such as Slack or regular stand-ups and things like that. And also you want to know what's actually changing, right? So get it written down on paper. How is the design changing, if at all? What URLs are changing? What's the new structure going to look like? Hopefully you're just changing one thing at a time. But we know how migrations work when other departments start to get involved and people want other things changing as well. And the last couple of examples that I'll give is in regards to the CMS. You want to know what CMS is going to be used on the new site and if that differs from the current one. You want to know how much support they're going to need in the redirect mapping. Is it something the developers are going to handle, or do they want you to do it? And finally, what specific goals do they want to achieve from the migration? And what I mean by that is, how can we measure the success of it? What KPIs does the business care about, and what KPIs do us as SEOs care about? And aligning the two or agreeing on certain ones, and those are the ones that can be used to gauge the success of the migration.
Brilliant summary. Thank you very much. It sounds like there's an awful lot to do. How far in advance of doing a migration should planning and the creation of that kind of document start?
Right at the start, during the specification process, while the various stakeholders and budgetary conversations are being had, that's when you also want to be having these conversations, or just as soon as possible is the short answer.
Are we talking about 6 months before the actual migration's done, or is there an ideal timescale?
There's not an ideal timescale, and the reason why I say that is because no migration is the same. There's the example I gave a few minutes ago. We've been working on that migration for somewhere between 6 to 9 months, but I did one last month that I've only been working for 1 month. So it's not a case of you need to get it 6 months in advance. You just need to get it as soon as possible. So for my client that migrated last month, the minute they contacted me and asked me about my services to help with the migration, I went back to them with a migration briefing document, and that helped me to plan my resources, look at my time, but also work out my costs, because I knew what sort of support they needed from me. And that goes for, whether you're an agency or whether you're an individual doing it. As soon as possible, get these questions out, get your migration planning document sorted, and then it'll create less headaches further down the line.
Talking about headaches, do you ever get a client approach you and say, we've done a migration, can you check from an SEO perspective that everything's been done correctly?
Yeah, all the time, because a lot of them seem to think we've done it. Can you just SEO it? And I'd love to know what that means. I still don't know what that means, and I've been in the industry God knows how many years. Or the classic question is, we've migrated it, but we don't know what happened and things are down. And that's the thing. A lot of people just think that a migration's simple, or if they're just doing a .co.uk to a .com change, they think, oh yeah, that's obviously going to be better, therefore things are going to go well. But they don't take into consideration the bigger picture and what that actually means in terms of redirect mapping and how that can affect customers and Google indexing and all these other things. So again, the migration document covers all of that. But then, yeah, when people come to us, and I want to find out what they've done, when it happened, what support they had. I get them to send me any redirect mapping that they did, and try and work backwards to get to the root of the problem and see what we need to do to fix it.
Great. Okay, so you have a conversation with them. You actually figure out what they did, what their goals were for trying to achieve, to do what they actually did, and then you delve into that information. So it's not a case of having a look at analytics to see what pages are down or traffic's down at all. It's just simply gathering data with regards to what they did.
I do, but usually if they're coming to me and saying that things have gone wrong, we already know that things are going to be down in GA or Search Console. I focus on the tech side, so yes, I will look at what's happened in the the various analytics tools, but I want to fix it. So I want to find out what happened that led to that, and then I can work with other people or the internal teams who are going to dive a lot deeper into the analytics. For me, I'm looking at the how and the why, and then we can get to the bottom of it and move forward.
What are the key people and organizations that you need to get on board with regards to your document and ensuring that migration is a success?
It's your key point of contact, whether that's a marketing manager, another SEO professional, or a higher stakeholder. You definitely need your main point of contact to be involved and to know what this document is for. And in my experience, once I've explained it, it's never been an issue. They get it and they know that it can benefit them as well, especially if they have higher ups who are pressuring them. They know that this is, as I said, the central resource, and they can refer back to it as well. And it becomes useful when there's marketing departments who are oh, can we just change this as well? Or, whoever else it is, it's no, that's not in scope because we're actually focusing on this and this is why. Everything else we can do further down the line. So the main things is your main point of contact. If you can get higher up stakeholders involved, then great, the more the merrier. In terms of this specific document template, you don't really need developers to be involved. Although if they want to, that's great. You can start to get their contact details in here as well. So you know that if you have a problem with a redirects, for example, or if the website ends up going live and it's still no indexed, you can refer back to your document and be like, right, that's the email address of the person I need to contact. It's dave@seo.com or dave@dev.com. I'm going to email him and he's going to fix it. Yeah, it can be like a very flexible document for people at all levels, really.
Do you ever advise against a migration happening if the client comes to you and wants to migrate something, but you think it's working perfectly well already? Would you counsel against doing that?
I haven't, but it's an interesting question. It's why one of the first questions that I have and that I mentioned earlier is, what is the main reason for the migration? And if it's just because the CEO thinks it's a good idea, then maybe not. But if you're changing it because, you want to be able to expand in the future, or you're moving to a new CMS which will give you XYZ functionality, then great, I'm all on board. But if you're doing it just because Fred down at the pub said, let's do this, then probably not. I've never had to do it, but I certainly would, or I would at the very least ask additional questions before we progressed any further.
Fred's to blame for a lot of things.
Yeah. Or it might just be that, you know what, I'm not the right person for you to work with because I don't agree with your approach or the way this is going. Best of luck. Here's some other people that you might find helpful.
Do you ever try and put a financial value against failure to motivate people to get it right? For instance, if there's a traffic drop or something that happens on the website, do you say, well, if this happens, then it's going to cost you X $100,000 by doing that. So we absolutely can't let that happen.
Yeah, so I do this in my wider tech work, but I'm also doing it in the actions that come off the back of the migration. So you've done a migration, whether it's gone good or bad, there will be some form of action that you need to take. And yeah, it's getting that buy-in. So what I do is I've created what I call a revenue at risk calculator. And I use that because not all tech issues are created equal. You can't compare fixing site speed in the same way that you can updating your canonicals. Whereas if I use this calculator, it's all measured in the same way. And we use, traffic metrics, we use like search volume and conversion data and several other things, as well as basically I look at the number of issues that I've found and how big that issue is relative to the others. And that all factors into this final revenue that I come out with. And yeah, that's how I explain it to the client, is if we don't take action, if we don't fix this, based on your data, this is the revenue that we risk losing. And that's often quite a motivating number.
It sounds like the client is the one that initiates the migration most of the time. Have you ever actually done an SEO consultancy job for someone and actually recommended a migration yourself?
Yeah, we did a few years ago for a client that's in like the financial industry. And that was because their current CMS was a really old legacy system. It was a custom build. And even changing content took like 4 different people, if not more, to be able to do. And it was a nightmare. And being in the financial industry, things change quite often with like interest rates and various other things. And so they had to update it quite frequently. So we put a case forward for why this current setup just wasn't fit for purpose. And yeah, they knew the issue and they wanted to do it. But the issue that they had is, again, getting their higher ups, so the people at the top, to actually pay for it, basically. So we were able to support them in that, and they did eventually move to a new CMS. They went to a headless CMS in the end, and we're very happy.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
I would say we just need to stop taking such a laissez-faire attitude towards migrations. Migrations take up a lot of time. And if you're doing lots of other things at once or getting caught up in various other actions from the client, it does become incredibly, incredibly time consuming. And that's even more the case when a lot of other teams get involved, like I mentioned earlier. So get this migration document in place, the briefing document, agree what is happening. Anything else needs to be outside of scope, and that could be tackled at a later date. And just use that to cut out a lot of the noise and make sure that everyone knows exactly what is being worked on and why, and crucially who is responsible for each action.
Nikki Halliwell is a technical SEO consultant, so you can find her over at nikkihalliwell.com. Nikki, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you very much.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.